This is the Cliff Yates Show. Personal growth, motivation, inspiration, and philosophies for a great life.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Cliff Yates Show. American Cops, the truth. And why do I have any authority to speak on this subject? Because I was a police officer for over 35 years. 5 years I was a deputy sheriff for the Livingston County Sheriff's Department in upstate New York, a very rural, small department. We had 20 deputies. And after 5 years of service, working 5 years in patrol, I went to Los Angeles and joined the LA County Sheriff's Department, the largest sheriff's department in the country, if not the world, I believe. Over 10,000 deputy sheriffs. And after 30 years of service, I retired at the rank of sergeant, and over 15, close to 20 years working in patrol. But a couple of those years, I worked in the personnel division, specifically recruitment. And my wife, who also did 25 years on the LA Sheriff's Department, she retired from working in personnel for background. She did background investigations for the department. So she was involved in the hiring, and I was involved in recruiting people. And I feel compelled to do this episode. It was about 7 or 8 years ago that I was compelled to write a book. I said, oh, you can write your own book? I felt compelled to write a book because of the way the media was portraying police officers and the police profession at its whole. It was just wrong, and most of it was just untrue. It was lies. And so I felt compelled to come out with a book called The Truth About Cops and Why You Should Trust Them. And let me start this off by saying there is no greater amount of people. There is nobody more against bad policing, corrupt police officers, corrupt police agencies and organizations, against police brutality or any malfeasance by police officers than the police officers themselves. Good cops, good police officers, they're the strongest opponent to bad cops, bad policing, and because we cannot function as a law enforcement body without the cooperation of our partners, the general public, because we are the public. Police officers are the public are the police. Cops are moms, dads, sons, daughters, brothers, sisters, and the way, and this whole thing that started with defund the police and really focusing on a couple incidents, and there's no doubt as we see through body cams and video that we see, even the police officers will, if they're truly honest, will see things that are just totally wrong. Some are criminal, some are corruption, and some just look bad, and they're not either of those things, but they just don't look good. But those things are blown out to actually, label the whole profession as being those microcosms of what the true culture of policing is. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, American Cops, the truth. And I'm going to tell you, you don't have to read the book. I'll tell you in today's episode. One of the reasons I wrote that book, The Truth About Cops and Why You Should Trust Them, is I wanted to put out there in opposition to what the news was portraying, that if you just watched news, you would think, oh, they take people right off the street. They make them police officers, and no wonder there's corruption and bad things happen, when that is totally not the case. And so I wanted to come forward and tell you exactly what the process is. And I've worked in a rural upstate New York and the process they go through, and I worked for the LA County Sheriff's Department. And so I know the backgrounds and the recruitment for the large departments, LAPD, the Sheriff's Department, California Highway Patrol, and these are the elite academies, the elite police organizations of the United States. I mean, they lead the field sometimes years and years ahead in technology and procedures, years ahead in procedures and technology. And so I want to share these things with you so that you know the truth. And let me say to my brothers and sisters, a lot of those that I know are watching this because they have a connection with me and they know me and they want to see what I'm putting out there. So please, my brothers and sisters, share this with people who might need to hear this, who might need to know the truth. And if you don't want them to hear from me in this episode, please, we have to start putting that out there. We have to start being, we have to stand up for our own profession. And there's no doubt, if we can see over the last couple of years that we see policing being weaponized in a political way. When we look back at the last couple of years during the pandemic, and we see that cops were used to write tickets to people who were not wearing a mask. They were out there surfing. But this is really a microcosm of what actually goes on, and what police are there to do and what their mission is. And you got to listen, this is a group of people, police officers, who actually sign a blank check to put their life on the line for people they don't even know. For myself and for most cops, we know that it's probably going to be a rare occurrence that we have to do that. We don't want that to happen. We don't want to die in the line of duty, but we do sign up knowing that this could happen. It is a possibility. We are going to take that risk in the name of service, that we want to serve the community which we live, and to make really the country and the world a better place, because the oath that everybody takes, and all police officers take an oath to defend the Constitution against foreign and domestic enemies. And so we need to stand up for that, even if we're retired like myself. Standing up for the U.S. Constitution and what we stand for does not end. And although in recent generations we were able to do our service and say, well, we did our part, and now we can sit this one out, we no longer can do that just based on what is happening, because one thing we really do need is law and order. And police officers and agencies, what they do to try to get the best and most honest candidates is they really do their due diligence. And I can tell you that from personal experience. And sometimes people get through the system, very rarely. And sometimes people already on the job go bad. And sometimes it's just a different perspective as to looking at what happened. There was actually nothing wrong at all, and it just looks bad as an optical thing. So I'm going to tell you what people do in the hiring process, in the recruiting process. All agencies want to do the best they can to try to get the best candidates for the job, because that's the only way that we can be effective. So here's how it goes, right? Somebody applies to be a police officer, let's say for a large agency like the LA County Sheriff's Department, LAPD. They're all pretty similar in the steps and procedures they take to take applications, and they actually will come up with a written test to see if people are really suited to police work, if they have the aptitude to a certain intelligence level to get to the next phase. So they'll actually use consultants and organizational psychologists to come up with the best questions that they can ask to try to get the best candidate that might fit being in police work. And as far as recruitment, in years ago, really the focus was, let's focus on people that are getting out of the military. They've already been in an organization that was structured, it was disciplined, and there was a moral component to it. People who had already taken an oath to defend the country and the Constitution. So what better group of people to recruit than people who are already in service to America, in service to fellow citizens. So we would recruit. I know our recruitment, we would go to the Marine base in California, in Camp Pendleton. We would go to the Marine base when people are coming back from being overseas, from service, and they were due to get out of the military. And so they were making a decision, a choice. What do I do next? And so when we were in a big hiring phase, we would focus on that group of people. And departments also will have an Explorer program where they try to identify people in high school, young people that may have already a propensity that they want to be of service in law enforcement, fire service. They want to be in public service. So we try to get those people into our Explorer programs in their teens so that we can bring them up and we can get them involved in the process, let them know what they have to do next steps. And it can keep them really on the path of going for the goal of being in public service, of being a police officer, without falling into something that might hurt their background. because that's going to be a key component to anyone getting hired in a police department is the background investigation. So people make out the application, and then they take a written test. And then the background process will begin. And part of that will be a first phase interview, a first interview after the application and or the test. And so people wrote down on their application certain things. They answered the questions, and now they're face to face with the background investigator, and they're kind of going over, hey, you said this, you said this, you said that. Let's clarify this and see where you're coming from. You said this. You used marijuana this many times. Was it actually 40? Could it have been more? Could it have been less? And so at that time, you might want to make sure they want to confirm what they've already put down on paper, maybe part of their biography. Usually in an application process, you have to write an autobiography telling about your life. It does a couple things, right? It puts down in paper your view of what you've done up until this point. It also will highlight how you write. Do you already have pretty good writing skills? How is your grammar, your English? So people will go over that autobiography. And that's very important because later on, even though they said, okay, no, it's 40 times. No more than 40 times that I use marijuana. And then 6 months down the road, when they're going to their polygraph examination, right, they'll come back and say to their background investigator, I passed my polygraph exam. I'm so excited. Why am I disqualified? You're disqualified because you got to the polygraph after 6 months of maintaining this story, this confirmation of truth that the amount of times you used marijuana was around 40 times. And when you got to the polygraph, you said, well, I know this is my last step before getting hired that I really have to tell the truth. And you know what? It was more like 400 times that I used marijuana. And so they get excited that they passed the polygraph exam, but by omission, they left out the truth until the very end. So it's so important. And more important, during the whole process, everybody is looking for, the background investigators are looking for truth along the way, that people are always telling the truth, and not just when it has great weight to it, or they're thinking this might prevent me from getting hired, so I will lie along the way. So they look for truth through the whole process, from the beginning of application through the interviews, all the way up until the polygraph, until they're hired. They're looking for truth, as in coming forward with truth, and also that people are not omitting truth. So when that background investigation starts, everything is looked at, and the background investigator uses extreme due diligence. So if you have an applicant who went to college in several different colleges, that background investigator will contact each college that person went to, and they will inquire as to whether there was ever a incident report written by the college police force there, the college security. Was this person ever a suspect in a crime? Was this person ever involved in an incident? And please send us those reports, and they'll get those reports back from wherever they lived. Then those background investigators will contact the police departments where those universities were, whether it was a village, a town, or a city. Was this applicant ever involved in an incident? Were they ever the suspect of a crime? Were they ever the victim of a crime? Did they come forward and state that when those reports get sent back to them? And sometimes this could take weeks or maybe months to make sure that all those things come back to the background investigator before they go forward with the process. In most cases, I know at one time they actually asked for all of the applicants' passwords to their social media platforms. And so those they would go over those. Is there anything on there? Is there any pictures on there that would indicate someone who is less than a reputable person that should be hired in law enforcement? Is there any evidence of violence, of domestic abuse, racism, anti-Semitism, these kind of things? Is there anything on their pages that would indicate that? Did they delete all of their social platforms prior to getting into the process? Is there anything they're trying to hide? And then the background investigator will contact by phone, in person, by letter, and specifically if it's within 120 200 miles, if they can visit the places where they worked along the way, wherever they had employment from the age of, from their first job, from the time they were 15, 16 years old, every job they've had up and including to this day. Now, they do use some common sense. If people really don't want to tip their hand that they're applying to be a police officer and they're going to be leaving their current job. So there will be some kind of coordination to try to make sure maybe that doesn't happen until they're deep into the process, so they don't put in danger their current position. But so past performance, employee performance will be looked at. High school incidents, any problem incidents. Letters will be sent out to neighbor wherever they lived, those police agencies where residences were, where they lived, any police reports, victim and or suspects, incidents where they were involved in. And if those did happen, were they the suspect? Were they the witness? Were they the victim? Did the applicant come forward with that information? And so all of that is looked at. If the background investigator can go in person to the neighborhood where they live, and if it's been less than 2 years, they will go to the previous residence and they will ask those neighbors, this person, Jim Smith is applying to be a police officer. Anything that you know, anything that you would like to tell us that would support him being a police officer, or anything that you would want to tell us that would maybe indicate that he shouldn't be going into this profession. And so this is the kind of due diligence that police agencies go through. This is why when you apply to an agency, specifically like the LA Sheriff's Department, it may take 6 months or longer before your background investigation is even done. So you're doing this along the way. You're gathering all this information, where they lived, all the neighbors. You're interviewing the relatives. You're interviewing the spouses. Your spouse is applying to be a police officer. Do you know that? Is there anything that you would tell us? Do you support this? Does the family support this applicant being a cop? And you look at the family history. I mean, you kind of look at, is the family, where do they live? Do they live in a gang area? Does this person have any association with gangs? A history of drugs? All of these things, the background investigator is taking meticulous efforts to try to make sure this applicant is the best for our department. And so police agencies use such great due diligence to try to get the right applicant. Somewhere along the line, there's going to be at least a first phase medical. Is this person really whole physically? Are there any problems that would, disqualify? Do they have they had back surgeries, knee surgeries, right? And this is all in protection not only of the public, for which these applicants might end up serving, but also because for the tax money that people are going to be paying for these people to be serving as their police officers. Is there a propensity that this person might go off injured or get a medical retirement if we don't use due diligence to see that they're physically whole prior to being hired? So there's actually a pretty extensive physical examination. Not to mention there will be maybe one, maybe two psychological examinations. We will use psychiatrists. They are private contractors. They're not associated. They're not members of the department. These are psychiatrists that are hired as private entity contractors to go over these applicants. And there is a test that they use, hundreds and hundreds of questions, so that people cannot try to hide their maybe propensity for any biases, any prejudices they have. And so these organizational psychologists and psychiatrists will know exactly how many questions and what type of questions to ask to try to get to those answers. This is somebody we might better not hire if there's anything that might be an indication that this would be a problem in the future if they get hired as a police officers. So this is the due diligence that police agencies take, as opposed to what the public might, reasonably think is the opposite based on what the media puts out there. They're not championing police agencies saying, look at the great lengths they go through to make sure that the people that are being hired to protect us, they're not the optimal. And so this is what the agencies go through. So now they've gone through these background investigations. The investigator gets all this material. They talk to the person in person. They get a feel for them. They're professionals at asking them questions, body language, reading. They maybe even during the interview process, there's a little pressure put on them, right? Because some people might have something in their background that might indicate that they're not of the highest moral aptitude or highest character person. Hey, well, it shows right here you've had some bankruptcies. What happened here? Why do you have all these outstanding loans? Why have you not made an effort to pay those back? Why are you not working now? Why are you 2 years unemployed? These are questions that the background investigators want to ask. They could be red flags, but there may be a good reason for those things being part of their background. So now all these things come into the background investigator, and so they have these interviews, they have past employment, they have neighbors, they have schooling, police reports, they have the medical examinations, they have the psychological written test, they have the psychiatrist interview, they have a second phase medical, which will be more in-depth. There'll be blood tests. There will be x-rays to make sure there is no present physical ailments that could be indicate prior surgeries, which might disqualify them from being a candidate and do the job that is required of them. Now, of course, in the pre-employment physical agility test, when I went to the LA County Sheriff's Department, they had a program because they were recruiting out-of-staters. They had a program so that out-of-staters like myself could come in and be tested in 4 days and get all of the basic tests done in 1 week. So I take the written test, and if I pass that, which I did just by a hair, then I did a physical agility test that day, which let the people testing know this person could perform the physical, what is physically required of a police officer. So the test is specifically targeted to what you might have to do on the job. So we would have to run a certain distance. So this would all be in one test. You would run a certain distance around the track. You would climb over a 6-foot wall. You would walk on a balance beam. You would go through a window in a fence. Then you would climb over a chain link fence. Then you would run another distance. And then you would get you'd have to drag a dummy, right? There was about 150 pounds. You'd have to drag that for like 20 feet. And then right after that, you'd have to grapple. You'd have to grab an arrest simulator as if after all of this, now you're arresting someone, and it would cause you to have to pull back 2 levers and put handcuffs on somebody. And you had to do that in a minimum amount of time. And when I took the test, it was 2 minutes and 50 seconds. I did it in 2 minutes, 47 seconds. I mean, I was 3 seconds away from failing that physical agility test. And I had been a police officer already for 5 years. And so once you did that was 1 day, written, physical agility. The next day was an oral interview. And so people interview to see, there's usually a panel of 2 to 3 people, and they ask you questions about police work. Will you work weekends? Can you work weekends? Can you work with all sorts of people? Are you going to be able to take direction? Are you going to be able to take supervision? Are you going to be willing to do these things? What do you know about police work? What is your background? And do you know that we work 24 hours, 7 days a week? So you might have to work nights, midnight till 8 o'clock in the morning. Are you going to be willing to do that? So in the process, the background and the filtering out was already happening that day. So then if you passed that oral, then you would have a first phase medical, and then that might be it. And then in my case, my background investigator called me and said, you can either start the academy if they decide to hire you and then take your polygraph while you're out here, or you can fly out, take the polygraph, and then if you pass it, you'll be hired. And so I didn't want to quit my current police job until I had already been hired by the LA Sheriff's Department. So I flew out for a second trip and I took my polygraph examination. So this is what a police applicant has to go through to get hired. This is just the hiring process. So before a police officer ever gets to the street, ever gets to answering a call of service by you and or me, this is the hurdles that they have to go through just to get hired. Now, once they get hired, then they go into the academy. In the academy, and when I went, it was considered what they called a high stress academy. In other words, they wanted to make sure that you were stressed during the process of learning. So they wanted to make sure that you were really sleep deprived. You had a lot of sensory overload. They were throwing a lot at you at once. And then you were expected to perform certain tasks, and you were being judged by the drill instructors of the academy and also by your fellow cadets. So you couldn't just be someone who didn't work well with others, but you got everything done and did it the right way, because you got evaluations by people in our case, it was our own platoon would give us, we would do an evaluation of each other. And so that could give an indication to the drill instructors if there was a problem person who they might be passing academically, maybe physically, and when they're performing stuff, but there was a problem with getting along with other people. And so the whole idea of providing stress during this phase, and for the LA Sheriff's Department, it was 18 weeks when I went through. It might even be longer now. This stress on you would be on a daily, weekly basis. And, the idea was if you're going to kind of break down or the stress is going to get to you or you're not going to be able to perform well under stress, then this will come out during the academy process. And you could be removed from the academy and maybe pointed into the direction of getting employment somewhere else. And many times that would be the case. People would be in the academy and they weren't making it to be an officer, but there was, they could point them in the direction of maybe a civilian position within the department itself. So we would try to even, maintain those people if there was some value there that they didn't quite, rank up to the level of being a sworn officer, but they were still, could be a great employee in another role. And so we would try to do that. Because in an academy of 100, if we had, I think it was 100 in my academy class, give or take a few, we lost attrition rate about 20%. So out of 100, around 80 graduated. So we lost 20 people. It turned out not to be for them. Sometimes applicants who've gone through this whole process, background, this whole thing that took 6-7 months, and they get in the academy and they find out, hey, this is not the job for me. This is not a good fit. And so those people are washed out prior to the public being risked with anyone who shouldn't be, out on patrol in a life and death situation. This is what cops go through. Now, in the LA Sheriff's Department, you have 2 mandatory assignments, right? The jail and then patrol. So you couldn't, very rarely, maybe one person out of academy class for a reward for their exemplary, performance in the academy. Maybe one person would be an honor cadet who would go straight to patrol. 99.999 of everybody who graduates from the LA County Sheriff's Academy goes directly into a custody facility. They have to work the jail prior going to patrol. And then depending on what patrol station they put in for and what the turnover rate is, they might not go to patrol either in 1 year, could be 5, 6, 7 years later, depending on what's going on in the transition. Or it could be a high activity transition between people leaving the department and people coming on. And I knew people who, depending on what station they put in for, went to patrol within 6 months. So could be a big difference. So that's the Sheriff's Department. So you ended up getting a street officer in the LA Sheriff's Department that was pretty seasoned. So by the time they hit patrol, so they go to custody, and then when they're going to go to patrol, they have to go to a patrol school. It's like another mini academy, and they have to be, it's kind of almost like a recertification, a refresher course, update on laws and our procedures within the department, trying to get these people geared away from the custody mindset, and now you're going into a patrol mindset, and you're going to have to go out. We would actually go to Warner Brothers Studios, the movie studios, and there was scenario set up, real life things set up, and actual, sets on the studio, and houses, and then banks, and we would answer calls as if we were in patrol. So you're actually seeing someone perform from what little they know already, how they would perform under a stress situation, and they hire actors to be witnesses. They hire actors to be fellow officers. They hire actors to be criminals, and deputies come in and they volunteer to be criminals for the day. And so if a person maybe is not acclimated to be a police officer in patrol, this will show up during this process, and they'll go through another weapons training. Whereas in the LAPD, they graduate from the academy, and naturally, most of them go straight to patrol. So you might get a 21-year-old. They graduate, they're in patrol the next day. LA Sheriff's Department, 21-year-old, they go to custody. And so for 1, 2, 3 years, they're working in a jail facility. They're learning how to communicate and talk to not only just regular people, they're learning how to communicate with criminals, gang members. They're learning gang lingo. When you're in the jail facility, criminals will talk to you. They'll actually, it's like a neutral zone. They'll tell you how they commit their crimes, and you gain. So a lot of times we get such great, right out of custody, we have great street cops already, because they're already acclimated to the gang culture, how they talk, how they think, and they've learned a lot along the way, and they've matured from being a 21-year-old to maybe 24, 25, 26-year-old, and they know how to talk to people, and they know how to take control of a situation in a professional manner, and they're already leaders, everybody. And so that's the kind of people that we're getting on patrol. We're getting professionals, and this is opposed to what's being put out there by the media. Not the case. One of the most professional, it's one of the highest moral professions that there is. Granted, we see malfeasance, criminality in the police culture and the police profession. We see it on the news, but the amount that is minuscule. I would say less than 1%. But I mean, let's face it, the amount of damage, if you had 1 million police officers, and out of the 1 million you had one bad cop, one corrupt cop, the amount of damage that one person can do is tremendous. Because, let's be honest, most people in their interactions with the police, either there isn't any at all, or it's usually brief and maybe once or twice, and maybe it's just a negative contact in the fact that they got a ticket, they got a traffic ticket, and so the contact with an actual police officer is very minuscule. And so that perception, right? Perception, people respond to perception, not reality. And that's what happens when, and so it's very dangerous what has happened to the profession because of the amount of trust that is no longer there based on what's been put out there. And the police are being backed off from being proactive. And this is a very dangerous time for us as the public now, because I'm retired, and it's a very dangerous time for police officers. And let's face it, you're in a high-paying job. It's pretty high-paying. You full medical, and you get benefits, family, and listen. Hey, there's the fear. You're going to get involved in the wrong situation. You stop the wrong person, and if people are videotaping that, and if it goes wrong in the news, probably going to get fired. You're going to lose everything. And so we just get more and more, and you can hardly blame them for not wanting to be proactive. They're getting into the mode of, okay, I'll answer my calls. When someone calls, I'll be there. I'll take a great report, and I'll do my job in a great way. But when it comes to being proactive and looking, there's a guy running away from a house with a TV set. I'm sure he's just going to his neighbor to watch the football game, and that guy's TV broke. I'm not gonna stop him, because that might go bad. And if I have to use force, that might really go bad, because I might be in the news that night, and I might not continue with my job. So we're in a dangerous time, and so I felt it was necessary to put out this episode, because it's something that I've been talking with a lot of my fellow police officers about, and there's been change, and we've seen some negativity, and we've seen police officers a lot on the TV. What are they doing? And so it's not that there aren't bad cops out there, but hey, listen, these body cams and videotapes, they're catching people. But I'm seeing that there's not a lot of cooperation, right? There's people being challenged. Why are you stopping? No, I'm not going to cooperate with you until you justify why you're even talking to me. It creates a dangerous precedent when a lot of times there's no time for that. There is a procedure for gaining relief if you think you were wrong. You can have a recorder on. You can have a camera on. And you can ask for a supervisor. You can go later to the station to make a complaint or inquire, why did this happen? Why was I ordered out of my car and told to lay down on the ground, and then I was later let go? Why did that happen? No one explained it to me at the scene. And so, but to stop cooperating in a hot situation can be very dangerous for everybody involved. And so this is what I see happening. But it's also the lack of trust. It's the lack of belief that the police culture is an honorable culture and it should be trusted because it should be. And believe me, every police officer, as I said before, is a mom, dad, son, daughter, brother, sister, people's families. These people took an oath, defend the Constitution, wrote a blank check, willing to give up their life for people they don't even know. People join this profession not to be corrupt, not to use it to their own advantage. If that happens down the road, it does happen. Good cops are against that, and those people will be found out. We have to partner together, and we got to have law and order in the United States of America. We have to have confidence in our police. If we need to have reform, we'll have reform. Granted, more education for cops, more expertise, granted. Also, together with that, we need a civilian academy. People need to understand why cops do what they do. When I was with the LA Sheriff's Department, our Sheriff Baca, he came up with a civilian academy program, which I didn't like at the beginning because those people would ride with me. And all those people came in the civilian academy. They would ride with the police officer. They would sit on a shift in the dispatch center. They would go to the shooting range. They would ride with the K-9 officer. They would go into the helicopter for the Aero Bureau. And when those people got done, every one of them, because I would talk to them as they graduated, and every one of them was the staunchest supporter of the police. I had no idea what you all go through. I had no idea this is what you do. I am astonished. And they became our biggest backers. So we need more of that. 30, 40 years ago, there was no transparency in police work because you didn't want to tip off criminals as to what we did, how we did it, and why we did it. But as we've become as a culture, we need to be more transparent, let people know why and what we're doing. We need to have that public trust. And so going forward, we're going to need some reform, and we're going to have not just more education for police, more education for citizenry, because they need to know what and why we're doing what we're doing. There's been a couple incidents. One gentleman wrote a book. So there's been several people who joined the police departments. One was a psychologist. I think there's two psychologists. They joined. Anti-police was their mentality. I'm going to get in amongst them so that I can expose the corruption, the corrupt police officers' culture. And they got involved by joining up, going through the background investigation, and then working the streets. One of those psychologists ended up in a shooting situation, and he wrote a book because his whole psychology turned around when he found out what the police have to do, and he found himself in that shoot, don't shoot right now, split-second decision-making, and you have to do that in protection of your life and or someone else's. And then after that, a group of people has 2, 3, 4 weeks, months to meticulously go over what you did and why did you do that. And let's look at it from a 100 different ways. I understand you had a split second to make that decision. We're going to go over this decision for months, and we're going to come up with a decision whether that was good or not. And so when people get put in those situations or see what the police have to go through, they become the biggest supporters of cops. And so we have to go forward from today, and we've got to support our cops, get better cops, get better citizens who work together with the police. And I think we can make that happen. So I hope you enjoyed this episode, American Cops and the Truth About Cops. I wanted you to know exactly what people go through to get hired, what agencies go through to make sure they're getting the best candidate. And believe me, police agencies go through such due diligence to try to get the best candidate they can. And let's hope we can get back to providing law and order in this country, and that we're not weaponizing our police for other reasons. And let's get back to making our streets safe in this country, because the whole idea of great cops is this. The great motivation for all cops is not to take away or restrict citizens. It's to free them. It's to have no crime, or as close as possible to a crimeless community, so that if you want to go walking down the street for a walk at 2 a.m., you can do it with the confidence you're not going to be the victim of a crime. This is the motivation of the police, not to take away freedoms, but to provide, to enforce laws that will give the American citizen the greatest freedom that they can have. That's it, everybody. This has been the Cliff Yates Show, and please subscribe to the channel. If you're on a podcast platform, subscribe. Share this with somebody else who needs to hear it. And YouTube, hear or see it. Share it with somebody else. Please subscribe. You know I love you. I'll see, and you'll either see or hear me on the next episode.